Guys, welcome back. Today we will be discussing few multiple choice questions of endodontics or some practice questions for endodontics for NBDE exam or for NEET MDS exam or any other competitive exam. So let's get started with today's first question. The most superior of all other retrograde filling material. So we know the retrograde filling material which we use nowadays is MTA, which is the mineral trioxide. So the most superior of all other retro filling material, which is MTA, the question itself is telling that that's the best material which we use, has all of the following advantages except two. So, which two are not the properties of MTA? So, the mineral trioxide aggregate MTA, let's understand the indications, contraindications, advantages, and disadvantages, and the properties so that we can solve this question. Talking about the mineral trioxide aggregate, so it comes in two color. That is why it is divided into two forms, a white form of the MTA or a gray form of the MTA. So white color is white MTA, gray one is gray MTA. And if you see this MTA, now one of the best property of MTA is that it provides a best seal. So if you put this mineral trioxide aggregate in the end of a root canal, so it is not going to let any of the bacteria either go from the bone to the canal, or it will not let any bacteria from the canal go into the periradicular area. So that's a best property, that it provides an excellent seal, and that's the reason that this material is used for root end filling material, something which we fill in the end apical portion of the root we fill with the MTA. Also in case of surgical endodontics, also if you are doing apexogenesis or apexification, as we have discussed in the previous part, apexogenesis, apex means the apex of the teeth, that is the lowermost part of the root. Genesis means formation, so we are forming the lowermost part of the root in case of a vital immature apex injury. That means the root has not developed properly, so this is immature apex, and in that the tooth is vital. See, if the tooth is vital, that means we can form the root, right? And this process is known as apexogenesis. We do it via a vital pulpotomy procedure, while on the other hand, apexification, fication word means we are fixing the apex. So we are making a barrier and fixing the apex. How we do is, first of all, we do in case of a non-vital teeth. So in case immature non-vital teeth, we do the apexification. And how we are fixing it, we are placing the MT and making a barrier. So first thing you need to do is clean up whole of the canal. In case of apexogenesis, you don't have to go for the whole canal removal. That is, we are not doing a pulpectomy for apexogenesis, while on the other hand for apexification you have to do a root canal treatment, or you have to do a pulpectomy procedure. You have to remove whole of the pulp, and in the bottom of this pulp you are going to place the mineral trioxide aggregate MTA, and then you make a barrier of 5 millimeter in case of open apex via this mineral trioxide aggregate. So this barrier will make a tight seal for the bacteria. It will not let the bacteria invade. So that is the main purpose of the MTA. It is used as apexogenesis, formation of the apex in case of a vital immature tooth, apexification, fixing of the apex, making a barrier at the apex of a non-vital immature teeth, root end filling material, wherein we have to do a endodontic surgery and then we have to fill some part of the root. That case also we use the mineral trioxide aggregate to fill the root canal, especially at the root end. And if there is perforation, then we repair this perforation via using the MTA. Also in case of incomplete vertical root fracture, which we will be talking about in another question in the today's lecture itself, that if there is a vertical root fracture, now when this fracture is incomplete, then it can be like we can give it a try to restore it via a root canal therapy. So in case if there is incomplete vertical root fracture, we can repair it via placing the MTA. Again, resorption of a root can be repaired via placing MTA because it forms a calcific barrier, and MTA can also be used as obturating material. So one of the important points that you have to remember about this MTA is that it is used as a root and filling material. It makes a apex it makes a barrier at the apex of 5 millimeter when you are doing the apexification procedure. So that's the most important point that you have to remember. Now, if you talk about calcium hydroxide, that is also alkaline in nature. If you talk about MTA, that is also alkaline in nature. So the main property is that it is going to soothe the pulp, or it is going to have a soothing property since it has got alkaline nature, right? So the difference between the calcium hydroxide, if you are placing calcium hydroxide to a normal pulp, what happens? There is going to be zone of liquefaction necrosis, zone of coagulative necrosis. All this we have covered in the pathology. So liquefactive necrosis is the one which is associated with the pus. Why we call it liquefactive? The reason behind is that the cells which are solid in nature, they get liquefied, they get softened. When this type of necrosis happens, these cells get softened or liquefied. That is the reason we call it liquefactive necrosis. It is also associated with a pus, or the another name can be colliquative necrosis. While on the other hand, if you see zone of coagulation, that is because of ischemia, which is the stasis of the blood. So blood is not reaching to the pulp, and that is why there is a coagulative necrosis. Then there is inflammatory response, and the calcium hydroxide will form a hard barrier, and it will take calcium from the blood. That is again a question which can be asked, which is frequently asked. Now talking about the MTA, when this MTA is applied on the pulp, it forms very narrow, or there is absence of coagulative necrosis. We also see a reparation, a reparative dentine formed. So a reparative dentinogenesis zone is formed, which is as a result of dentine bridge with the fewer vascular inclusions. So the reason behind this reparative dentine is formed, or we can say cementum is deposited, because of the alkaline nature of the MTA, mineral trioxide aggregate. Now, if you talk about this MTA, in a freshly formed MTA, it has got a pH of 10.2, but after 3 hours of mix, the MTA makes a pH of 12.5. So it's quite alkaline if we see. So because of this high alkaline pH, there, and also the calcium and phosphate ion, and because of that, the blast cells are attracted towards the site where we apply the MTA. So all these blastic cells like cementoblast, osteoblast, like that, these blast cell will come, and they are going to favor environment for cementum deposition, and that is why a barrier is formed. So talking about the properties of mineral trioxide aggregate, it is a biocompatible material. As I've told you, it makes a good seal. So this MTA, it makes a good bacterial tight seal. It is hydrophilic in nature. There are two terms. One is hydrophobic, another one is hydrophilic. Phobia word means that scare. Phobia word means that, see, phobic, phobia is for scared, right? So that means the thing is going to repel. If it is scary, that means you're going to go away from that. So hydrophilic, on the other hand, is the term for loving. Since MTA is water loving, so it wants water too big to set. So this MTA is mixed with the saline. Also, now recent some of the studies author says that you don't have to even put a moist cotton, because the saliva from the blood will also act on MTA to solidify the MTA. So some people, like some authors says that we put a moist cotton on the top of MTA, and then we send the patient for few hours, for 1 or 2 hours, and then you restore it. Some authors says that we do not apply a moist cotton. There is no requirement of applying a moist cotton. In fact, the saliva in the mouth will be helpful to solidify the MTA. So, talking about the pH of MTA, a freshly mixed MTA has a pH of 10.2. On the other hand, 3 hours of mixing will have a pH of 12.5. Setting time of MTA is very long, and that's the main disadvantage to the dentist. Since the setting time is very long, it is 2 hours and 45 minutes, and if you calculate it in minutes, it is going to be 165 minutes. Since the setting time of MTA is very long, so you have to place the MT in the patient mouth, and then you have to wait for like 3 hours, approximately 3 hours, to get it set or to solidify it. So it's a really long time. That's a big disadvantage. But setting time can be reduced if we add any accelerators such as calcium chloride, calcium fluoride, potassium chloride, or we can also add disodium hydrogen orthophosphate. So setting time can be reduced if we add these accelerators. So this MTA powder is mixed with the saline, and it is carried with the, see, it is also difficult to manipulate. So there are two main disadvantages up till now we have covered. One is that it is difficult to manipulate. Another one, it has got a long setting time of 2 hours 45 minutes, or we can say 165 minutes. So it is mixed with the saline, and it is carried with a messing gun or dogon or a amalgam carrier, and it is very difficult to manipulate. So it solidifies very slowly. It takes somewhere around 165 minutes to solidified. And if you want to do a permanent restoration for MTA, then you have to either wait for 45 minutes or you have to wait for a day. And the main advantage of using this MTA, one of that is that it has got an alkaline pH. So because of that, it promotes the cementum deposition. Another one is, again, because of this alkaline pH, it resists the endodontic bacteria, which is Enterococcus faecalis, E. faecalis. So it also resists the bacterial growth. Talking about advantages in a nutshell, it forms a dentinal bridge formation, that is via the cementum deposition. It has got a faster pulp healing, high success rate. It's a biocompatible bioactive material. It has got antibacterial activity or action with good stability. And it forms an excellent seal. That is what I told you. It forms an excellent bacterial seal. Talking about the disadvantages. So one of the main disadvantages of the MTA is that it has got a long setting time of 2 hours and 45 minutes. And it is difficult to handle. We use amalgam carrier for that, but still it is very difficult to handle or manage. Then the cost of the MTA is quite high compared to others, and discoloration potential is also seen to the dental tissues for MTA. Now, if you see composition of MTA, what is responsible for this discoloration is the barium oxide. So this barium oxide, which is responsible for a radio opacity, if you see in an X-ray and if you find this white color filling, that is because of the barium oxide present in the MTA. And so see, one of the main advantage of this barium oxide is that, it's bismuth oxide. So one of the main disadvantage of the bismuth oxide is that the main disadvantage is that it discolors the tissues, dental tissues. So it discolors the teeth. But the main advantage of bismuth oxide is that it provides a radio opacity. So it's quite easier for us to visualize in an X-ray if we have done MTA filling. But we have to overcome the discoloration. So if the patient has come for a filling, or if you have done any treatment, you do not want to do any harm to the patient. So purposefully we cannot discolor the teeth. So we can replace this bismuth oxide with the tantalum oxide, which is in a MTA plus, So in MTA plus, this tooth discoloration is not seen because the bismuth oxide is replaced with the tantalum oxide to overcome the tooth discoloration. The other components of MTA, so remember, it is all about calcium. Calcium, dicalcium, tricalcium, tetracalcium. We have three forms of calcium. Dicalcium is seen with a silica, so dicalcium silicate. Tricalcium again seen with the silica, tricalcium silicate. Tricalcium silicate is also with the alumina, so aluminate, tricalcium aluminate. Also tetracalcium aluminoferrite. And as I've told you, we have two forms, white form of MTA and grey form of MTA. Both the MTA contains 75% Portland cement. So if you see white MTA, this tetracalcium aluminoferrite is absent in a white MTA. So bismuth oxide, which is a radio opacifier, that's the disadvantage, that's the main advantage of the bismuth oxide, that it is a radio opacifier. But the main disadvantage is that it discolors the tooth. So bismuth oxide is replaced by tantalum oxide in MTA plus to overcome the tooth discoloration. So as I've told you, initial mix or fresh mix of MTA has got a pH of 10.2, but on the other hand, a 3 hours mix has got a pH of 12.5. So the setting time also varies. After 24 hours of mixing, the compressive strength is lowest for MTA, which is 40 megapascal. And if we see 21 days after the mix, the compressive strength is increased to 67 megapascal. And also this MTA makes a good bond with the GIC, and that's the reason we use GIC between composite and MTA. So MTA, two kinds, gray MTA and white MTA. And white MTA we have studied, it doesn't contain tetracalcium aluminoferrite. So if you see the gray MTA, both contains, gray and white are made up of 75% Portland cement. And if you see the gray MTA, it has got a mean setting expansion of 1.02% if it is mixed with water. The setting expansion is decreased when it is mixed in the Hank's balanced salt solution, which we will be covering in the storage media for the avulsion teeth. So the mean setting expansion is decreased if we use Hank's balanced salt solution instead of water, to decrease to 0.68%. White MTA has got a lower setting expansion compared to the gray. So the setting expansion of the white MTA with the water is 0.08% and with the Hank's is 0.11%. And if you see the setting expansion for the Portland cement, so 75% Portland cement is what constitutes the gray and the white MTA. And the setting expansion for the Portland cement itself is 0.29% if it is mixed in water. And since we know that both of these MTAs are made up of 75% Portland cement, so that is why they have got setting expansion. See, sometimes students get confused this MTA with MTAD. MTAD is a irrigation solution, it's a irrigant, while MTA is a root end filling material. So that's the difference between MTA and MTAD. So MTAD, again, as the name suggests, it contains M, T, A and D. So M means a mixture, T means tetracycline, A means acid, and D means detergent. So we have tetracycline, some acid and some detergent in MTAD mix, which is used as an irrigant. So 3% doxycycline hyclate, which is a tetracycline, is used in MTAD, 3%. Acid which we use in MTAD is 4.25% citric acid, and the detergent which we use is Tween 80, so which contains 0.5% polysorbate 80. There is another irrigant which is also used recently, that's known as tetraclean. So if you compare the MTAD and tetraclean, both contain difference in the doxycycline and the detergent. So as we know, the MTAD contains 3% doxycycline. So the dose of doxycycline in MTAD is 150 mg per 5 ml. And the detergent which we have used in MTAD is Tween 80, which is 0.5% polysorbate 80. While on the other hand, if you see the another irrigant, which is a tetraclean, contains only 50 mg per 5 ml of doxycycline and polypropylene glycol as the detergent. So that's the difference between MTAD and the tetraclean. Both are new irrigants. And this MTAD is highly effective against E. faecalis. And MTAD has got the potential for smear layer removal. Also, if you see the minimum amount of MTA which we use for open apex is 5 millimeter. For retrograde filling, that is root end filling, is 3 millimeter. So this is about mineral trioxide aggregate. Now let's reread our question and see all the options. The most superior of all other retro filling material, MTA, has all of the following advantages except two. What are the two? Which two are not the properties of MTA? So if we have a look at the properties, the first one is radio opacity. Yes, the radio opacity is provided by the bismuth oxide. Also, because of this bismuth oxide, there is discoloration of the dentine, and that's the reason in MTA plus we use the tantalum oxide instead of bismuth oxide. It is easy to manipulate. That's not a correct option. Actually, it is difficult to manipulate, and we use the amalgam carrier to manipulate the MTA. The MTA is hydrophilic. Yes, it's correct. MTA is hydrophilic material. It is water loving, and we use saline to mix the MTA powder. Also, we place the moist cotton on the top of that. Now, the MTA is biocompatible. This is a true statement. MTA is biocompatible. It is not toxic. It is also a true statement. MTA has got a short setting time. No, the answer to this question is going to be incorrect. Since MTA has got a longer setting time, it has got a setting time of 2 hours and 45 minutes, or you can say 165 minutes. So MTA has got a longer setting time, and in order to decrease the setting time, you can add accelerators like calcium chloride. So the induction of the hard tissue formation, yes, MTA makes a calcific barrier of usually made up of cementum. So which of the following, which two are not the property of MTA? Answer to this question is going to be easy to manipulate, since MTA is difficult to manipulate, and short setting time. That is incorrect because MTA has got a longer setting time. Now coming to the next question. So before jumping to next question, remember that you have to remember the setting time for MTA. The two ions which are found in MTA are calcium and phosphorus. The MTA has got a high pH, and this high pH of 12.5 and of fresh mix it is 10.2 makes a hard tissue barrier, and that's the reason it makes a hard tissue barrier. It has got a sealing property, the superior sealing property. And also, one of the good thing about MTA is that it reduces the inflammation because it forms a fibrous connective tissue and the cementum when it comes in contact with the periodontium. So this makes it a low levels of inflammation. Also, this MTA is used for retrograde filling material or retro filling material or reverse filling material. Earlier we used to use the amalgam instead of this. Nowadays we have a better option, which is the MTA. So if they are asking in the question about a retro filling material, reverse filling material or retrograde filling material, so the answer is going to be the MTA. Earlier we used to use the amalgam, but now we use the MTA. So this MTA is placed in the apical area and it is used to form the seal. So when we remove the apex, so when you are doing the apicoectomy procedure wherein you are removing the apex of 3 millimeter, in that case you are going to, when you are removing the apex, you are filling the material in the reverse order. So the reverse filling material of MTA is placed. I mean, it should be placed. And that is what we are talking about, that this retrograde filling. So the retro, when you are doing a picoectomy procedure wherein you are going to remove 3 millimeter of the apex, you have to place 3 millimeter of the MTA to provide a seal. So a picoectomy or root resection or root amputation, where the buccal tissue is flapped back and the buccal bone about the apex is removed, and the root apex which we have removed is mostly 3 millimeters of the root we remove. The area is then curated out because there can be granulation tissue. So all this granulation tissue also should be removed. So coming to the next question, which condition is an apical lesion that develops as an acute exacerbation of chronic apical abscess, also known as suppurative apical periodontitis? So it is talking about which condition is an apical lesion which develop as an acute exacerbation. That means it becomes chronic, but all of a sudden there is pain in that chronic abscess. What do we call this condition is a phoenix abscess. So phoenix abscess is exacerbation of previous asymptomatic chronic apical periodontitis. See, if a patient is having a chronic apical periodontitis, since the word chronic, you have to remember two things. If you see word acute, that means mostly the patient is having symptomatic. You will see pain, there can be swelling, cellulitis, all these things. So remember, acute means symptomatic. Chronic word means that there is no symptoms or no pain, asymptomatic. So if the patient is asymptomatic, the disease has come to a point where the disease has become chronic and there is no pain. In that case, all of a sudden there is severe pain like acute pain occurs. So this particular condition is known as phoenix abscess, or also known as recrudescent. Recrudescent abscess, recrudescent word means that breaking out again or renewing it. So earlier there was acute lesion, then the acute lesion progressed into the chronic apical abscess, but all of a sudden there is outbreak in this chronic apical periodontitis and the patient feels pain. This particular type of condition is known as a phoenix abscess. This is usually initiated in a root canal treated teeth, which is completely asymptomatic. So there is progression from acute apical periodontitis, which progress into chronic apical periodontitis over time. And when the granulomata zone is infected or contaminated, it forms the phoenix abscess. So if you see the radiograph of a phoenix abscess is similar to chronic apical periodontitis. So you will find large periapical radiolucency, as in case of a chronic apical periodontitis. But if you see the symptoms or clinical finding of a phoenix abscess, it is going to be similar to acute apical periodontitis. So the patient will have symptom of acute apical periodontitis, but a radiograph of chronic apical periodontitis. So that's an indication of a phoenix abscess. Now, sometimes what happens after or while you are doing a root canal treatment, in between the schedules, the patient will call you or the patient will unannounced visit your dental clinic during a root canal treatment. So, because of the pain or swelling which is associated during a root canal treatment. So, that is known as a endodontic flare up. Endodontic flare up is the acute exacerbation of an asymptomatic pulp or a periapical pathology after the initiation or continuation of RCT. Generally, what happens, if you have done excess opening, the patient shouldn't complain because you or after you have done the BMP. When you have done the cleaning, there is no nerve endings, nothing is left for the pain to occur. But even after that, sometimes patient will result in unscheduled visit. So that can be a reason for endodontic flare up, and the reason behind this endodontic flare up can be age. So especially the older age females is seen more with the endodontic flare up, or the patient with allergies are most often associated with the endodontic flare up, or the mandible is most commonly affected than the maxilla. Also, we see the patient taking painkillers before coming to the dental clinic, since they are so scared from root canal treatment or injections or anything. They will take a precaution and take a painkiller before coming to the dental clinic or before coming to the root canal treatment therapy procedure. So if the patient preoperatively takes a painkiller or analgesic or any anti-inflammatory, that can also result in endodontic flare-up. Teeth with a non-vital pulp or a necrotic pulp often can result in the endodontic flare-up. Also, you can see a periapical lesion can result in the endodontic flare up. This multiple visit root canal therapy will frequently be associated or more frequently be associated with endodontic flare up compared to a single root canal treatment. So, some causes for endodontic flare up is the necrotic pulp, asymptomatic necrotic pulp, also with a periapical lesion. That's the most common reason for the endodontic flare up. Reason can be like acute apical periodontitis or acute periapical abscess. These are the least common reasons. But remember, the endodontic flare up is most commonly involved with a asymptomatic necrotic pulp with periapical lesion. So there is non-vital teeth, and this non-vital teeth is associated with a lesion in the apex. So both of these, phoenix abscess as well as endodontic flare-up, both are acute exacerbation. But phoenix abscess is acute exacerbation of the chronic apical periodontitis. But on the other hand, endodontic flare-up is the exacerbation to asymptomatic pulp, and this pulp is usually necrotic pulp, and this is a non-vital pulp. Along with that, there can be a periapical lesion. And while doing root canal therapy, the patient will have pain in case of endodontic flare up. But if you see phoenix abscess, the patient will come to you and will represent as a pain associated or pain which is similar to a pain in acute apical periodontitis. In fact, all the symptoms of acute apical periodontitis like tenderon, percussion and all. So answer to this question is going to be, which condition is in the apical lesion that develops as an acute exacerbation of a chronic apical abscess, also called as suppurative apical periodontitis. Suppurative word is a word used for a pus. So the answer is going to be the phoenix abscess. So coming to the next question, chronic apical abscesses generally very painful, asymptomatic or mildly painful. We know the word chronic means that the patient is asymptomatic. While on the other hand, if we talk about acute disease, is always symptomatic and pain is associated with the or very painful. Acute condition is usually very painful. So the chronic apical abscess is generally asymptomatic. So this chronic apical periodontitis, which is also known as suppurative apical periodontitis, it is generally painless, and sometimes it can go undetected for years until it is revealed or diagnosed in an x-ray. So it's a long standing low grade infection of the periapical region of the bone, with the root canal being the source of infection. So this condition is usually undergoes untreated or undiagnosed since it is asymptomatic. So let's talk about all the apical periodontitis. If we take the normal apical tissue, see, the apical infection is generally as a result of pulpal infection. So if you see apical infection, that means we are talking about the periapical area, this particular area. So generally in the acute condition, you will see increase in the PDL. So the patient will have tenderon, percussion. That means if you percuss the tooth, there is going to be pain associated with that. So acute periodontitis will be manifested as tenderon percussion. And if you see chronic, that means they are generally asymptomatic. So if we see the normal apical tissues, they are usually asymptomatic. Normally, if there is no apical infection, so the normal tissues appear asymptomatic. There is no pain on percussion as well as palpation. And the radiograph appears normal. So there is normal osseous structure. Bone appears very normal with the intact lamina dura. So the lamina dura is also normal and visible. Talking about acute apical periodontitis, or as the name suggests, acute means the disease is symptomatic. The patient will have pain associated with the disease. So the symptom is the pain. That is the main symptom for always an acute condition. If we talk about chronic is asymptomatic. So acute, that means painful. Apical means apical region of the tooth, and periodontitis means the inflammation of the periodontium. Inflammation of the periodontium in the apical region with pain is going to be the finding for acute apical periodontitis. And this is also known as symptomatic apical periodontitis. So if you see, say, because of high points or abnormal occlusal contacts, we see inflammation in the periodontium in the apical region of the tooth. So the acute apical periodontitis manifests as the painful inflammation around the apex. The tooth is going to be painful on percussion. So there is tender on percussion, and the pain is generally intense and throbbing type of pain. Since it is acute condition, the pain is very intense and throbbing in nature, and the pain is due to localized inflammation or inflammatory infiltrate within the PDL. Since we are talking about periodontium, inflammation of the periodontium, that means the inflammatory cells will be found within the periodontal ligament. So normally the radiograph appears normal in case of acute apical periodontitis. Since it is the early manifestation, still there is no radiographic changes. Radiographic changes will be found in the later on conditions of the disease. So, but the tooth will be tender on percussion. So, if you percuss that tooth, you take the back of the mouth mirror and tap the tooth, the patient will start screaming in pain. So, that is the tender on percussion. If you percuss the tooth, that is tender, that is painful. How do we treat it? If the tooth is vital tooth, that means the tooth is a living tooth, then we have to check for the occlusal contact. If there is occlusal contact or high points, then we have to adjust the occlusion of the patient. So we have to remove the high points or the abnormal occlusal contacts in that particular teeth. Wedging of the foreign object between the teeth, and sometimes concussion also manifest as the tender on percussion. So all these things we have to check and treat it. If the tooth is non-vital, that is usually because of the pulpal disease. If the patient had pulpal disease progressed, that then it may progress into the acute apical periodontitis. So because of the infection from the pulp, now this infection invades into the periodontium. So from the pulp, the infection has gone into the PDL, especially in the apical areas. So because of that infection from the pulp, there can be inflammation of the periodontium in the apical region, in the periapical region, that manifests as periodontitis, apical periodontitis, acute apical periodontitis. So this can be a sequelae to pulpal disease, and since the pulp is already died, this is a sequelae of a pulpal disease. Pulp is already dead, the tooth is necrosed, so it's a non-vital teeth. Extrusion of the debris, or while you are doing a root canal treatment, if you have gone beyond the apex, if you have perforated the apex of the teeth, if you have gone out of the apical foramen, and then you can extrude, you can push the debris or you can push the irrigant beyond the apex, and therefore you can produce inflammation, and that can cause acute apical periodontitis. Again, the treatment for that is going to be a root canal treatment. Now that we have studied acute apical periodontitis, this disease over the time period can progress into chronic apical periodontitis. And since the word chronic, that means we can correlate it to the asymptomatic. The patient no more feels pain. So the tooth is seems to be quite normal, but in fact it has progressed into a chronic state. So chronic apical periodontitis is an inflammation, is an infection of the apical region of the periodontium, and therefore these patient will have apical radiolucency in the radiograph. So if you find the radiograph of these patient will have radiolucency in the periapical region. While on the other hand, if you compare it with the acute condition, the radiograph are quite normal. But in the chronic condition, in the chronic apical periodontitis, there is going to be the radiolucency in the apical region of the or periapical region of the teeth. So there is pulpal necrosis. Since the acute is progressed into the chronic, the radiographic finding is going to be acute the periapical radiolucency. So, periapical radicular lesion at the apex, and histologically, you will find either a granuloma or a cyst associated with a chronic apical periodontitis. So, granuloma, you will find the granulomatous lesion, and histologically, you can only differentiate it histologically, and the cyst, both are going to be well defined radiolucency, but the granuloma, in the histological section you will find the granulomatous tissue, while on the other hand cyst is going to be lined by the epithelium. So that's the main difference histologically between a granuloma as well as a cyst. Talking about the progression of disease from the chronic apical periodontitis will lead to abscess. Now there is going to be abscess in the periapical region, and we know that the abscess means there is going to be pus. So the abscess will start accumulating, and since it cannot go, so there is going to be swelling. It is going to increase in the pressure in that particular region. So there is going to be built up of the pressure, and this pressure will cause either swelling as well as this pressure will cause the pain to patient. So acute apical periodontitis is the most painful among all the periapical lesions. So acute apical periodontitis, there can be a rapid swelling, also severe pain, and this pain and swelling is due to the accumulation of the pus, and this pus will build a pressure, and this pressure will cause the swelling and the pain. Also because of the pus there is purulent exudate, and the pus is due to the liquefaction necrosis. So you will also find a liquefaction necrosis. Since we know liquefaction necrosis is associated with the pus, as we have studied in the oral pathology, that the cells, when they undergo necrosis, they are going to liquefy, they will become like liquid like because of the pus, and that's the reason we call it liquefactive necrosis. Since the cells are liquefied, they have become very soft and fragile, and or can also be known as colliquative necrosis. So there is going to be pus around the apex of the teeth, and it can also there can also be, may or may not be, cellulitis, or may not be bone destruction. So we usually see swelling, pain, purulent exudate, that is because of the liquefactive necrosis, and you have to remember that pus is associated with the acute apical abscess. So we are talking about the abscess here. So the most important feature you have to remember is the pain. Nature of pain is very severe and throbbing, and the reason behind is due to the pressure built up because of the pus. So the tooth is going to be tender on percussion, and since there is pus liquefactive necrosis, then the EPT or the cold test will not give any response. So the electrical pulp test or the cold test. On the other hand, the heat test may or may not give the necrosis. So how do we treat it? Since there is accumulation of the pus in the apical region, so suppose this is the tooth and here is the apex, so at the apex there is accumulation of the pus, so we have to drain this pus. How are we going to drain it? We make a cavity preparation over here, and then we drain, we make a channel for the pus to come out. So that is how we are removing this pus. We are making a excess cavity, and this excess cavity will act as escape hole for the pus. So talking about the progression of acute apical abscess over the time period into chronic apical abscess. So the acute apical abscess will progress over the time period into the chronic apical periodontitis, and it is also known as chronic suppurative apical periodontitis. Chronic suppurative means that pus is associated. So it's a progression from the abscess. Since it is a chronic abscess, so we see that the pus which is accumulated over the time period will find the path in the bone, will come out of the oral cavity. So if the pus is in the periapical region, and if it is of short duration, we call it acute apical abscess. What if the acute apical abscess is not treated? Then over the time period, this pus will find a path to come out of the oral cavity, since there is a lot of pressure built up. So it will find some way so that there is release of pressure, and this particular path is known as the sinus tract. So there is draining sinus tract, which we generally see in chronic apical abscess. That is the hallmark of chronic apical abscess. So acute apical abscess, there is rapid swelling and the pain, which is due to the accumulation of the pressure, which is due to accumulation of the pus. While on the other hand, this pressure is relieved via a sinus tract for the chronic apical abscess, and that's the reason that patient is asymptomatic. That's the reason that the patient is not feeling any pain anymore, because the pressure is now released via the sinus tract. So the patient will have a sinus tract without any symptom. And how do we track that which tooth is affected? We take a gutta percha, and the gutta percha, we insert it in the sinus tract. We take this gutta percha as far as possible and then take a radiograph. So in the radiograph, we will find the source or the root of this odontogenic infection. And this heals by this chronic apical abscess, heals by the granulation tissue after we do a root canal therapy. So the chronic apical abscess or chronic suppurative apical periodontitis, it is a long-standing low-grade infection of the periapical region of the bone, with the root canal being the origin of infection. So the origin of infection is the canal of the root, but this infection is going to the bone, to the periapical region of the bone. So that is a long-standing infection, which we call it the chronic apical abscess. So radiographically, we will find a diffused radiolucency, and we have to treat via a root canal therapy. If we do not treat this chronic apical abscess, it can proceed into condensing osteitis. So bone will start to develop inflammatory response, and in response to the inflammatory reaction, the bone will start proliferating. So there is going to be proliferation of the bone surrounding the apex of the teeth, and such a proliferative inflammatory reaction is known as condensing osteitis. So bone is going to be very hard in the periapical region. Sometimes you will find this radio opaque lesions around the bone apex of the tooth. So that is the condensing osteitis, which is because of the proliferation of the inflammatory response. So we have already covered this particular question. That now again reread the question or visit the question. The chronic apical abscess is generally asymptomatic, though in the chronic apical abscess we will find a sinus tract, a draining sinus tract. So it's not a painful condition, since the pressure is relieved via the sinus tract. In fact, if you have a look at the radiograph of a chronic apical abscess, it will have diffused radiolucency. And if you remember, this chronic apical abscess can develop over the time period into a phoenix abscess, which we have covered in the previous question. That acute exacerbation of the chronic apical abscess can lead to, or that condition is known as a phoenix abscess. That means after a chronic apical abscess, now the patient on a long standing case, all of a sudden starts developing pain. So that particular condition, the symptom will mimic like acute apical abscess. The patient can have tender on percussion pain or swelling, while on the other hand, the radiographic finding will be similar to the chronic apical abscess. So chronic apical abscess is going to be asymptomatic, but if we talk about acute apical abscess, there will be severe throbbing pain to percussion, and sometimes there can be swelling. So we have to treat it via root canal therapy. Now coming to the next question. The most common cause of acute osteomyelitis of the jaw. Unknown, iatrogenic, dental infection, radiation. Now we know that the radiation causes osteoradionecrosis. Dental infection can cause a pulpal disease. Then it can lead to a periapical disease, progress to, and this periapical disease can progress into the infection of the bone, which can cause osteomyelitis. So the answer of this question is going to be a dental infection. Infection from the teeth can go into the bone and cause the osteomyelitis, especially of the jaw. So let's revise few points about osteomyelitis. It is caused by Staph aureus. In fact, most of the bone infection are due to Staph aureus. So the infection starts from, as the word means, osteo means bone, myelitis, myelo words means myeloid, space, itis means inflammation. So this infection is basically start with the inflammation into the myeloid space, then the infection or inflammation proceeds into the spongy bone or cancellous bone, then via the Volkmann canal and Haversian system into the cortical bone. Say suppose that's a bone inside myeloid cavity, then into the cortex of the bone via the Haversian system, and this infection progress into the periosteum or involve the periosteum of the bone, and therefore it makes whole of the bone necrosed or avascular. So acute suppurative type of osteomyelitis, as the name suggests, acute is going to be painful. Suppurative means we see pus associated due to liquefactive necrosis, and also we will find fistulas. So if this acute suppurative, that means a painful pus involved infection of the bone, is mild, we call it the primary chronic. If it is severe, then it progresses into subacute, and after a month it will progress into the secondary chronic suppurative. So the chronic osteomyelitis will be represented as sequestrum and involucrin. So if you see radiograph, you will find this radio opaque bone. This radio opaque white bone is basically the dead bone, which we call it sequestrum. While on the other hand, if you see this dead bone surrounding the radiolucent area, this radiolucent area surrounding the dead bone is involucrin. So here we have the dead bone as radio opaque, while on the other hand, since the new bone which is forming, so it's not a fully formed bone, that is why it's a radiolucent bone. So the new bone which is forming surrounding the dead bone, this sequestrum is the dead bone, and it is radio opaque, while on the other hand, the new bone which is forming surrounding to this dead bone is known as involucrin, and since this bone is not matured yet, so we can call it as a radiolucent area. So that's a new bone which is forming. So in an X-ray, we will find the sequestrum as well as involucrin, and the X-ray of this particular patient with osteomyelitis will be represented as a moth-eaten appearance. So if you see a leaf which is eaten by the moth, you will find holes in a leaf. So this appearance of bone in an X-ray of a osteomyelitis patient will give appearance of a moth eaten. Also in a CT scan, we will find the erosion of the cortical portion of the bone. One type of osteomyelitis, which is known as Gary's osteomyelitis. In this case, in the Gary's osteomyelitis, from the myeloid space, the infection has infiltrated into the periosteum of the bone. And since this infection is long standing, so there is proliferation of the periosteum of the bone. We know that a long standing inflammation can always cause a proliferative event. So the periosteum of the bone start proliferating in response to the infection, or we can say inflammation. This particular kind of situation wherein the infection is chronic, long standing, and from the suppurative osteomyelitis, there is periostitis, sclerosing periostitis. Such a condition is known as Gary's osteomyelitis. And if you see, the proliferation of the bone is going to be in layers. So like this, one layer of bone is formed, then another layer of bone is formed in the periosteum, and another layer of bone is formed in the periosteum. So if you find in the X-ray will appear like onion skin appearance, like one layer is deposited, then another layer is deposited, like another layer is deposited. As we see layers on the onion, like that we will find the appearance in the X-ray of the Gary's osteomyelitis. So that is onion peel appearance. So if you see radiographically in the chronic suppurative osteomyelitis, we will see sequestrum involucrin. In the X-ray moth eat appearance, and in the CT scan cortical erosion of the bone. If you see this chronic suppurative osteomyelitis in a long-standing patient, because of this inflammation resulting in the sclerosing periostitis, that is known as Gary's osteomyelitis. In that case, you will find onion peel appearance in the X-ray or radiographic finding. So this is osteomyelitis is basically infection of the bone, and we have to treat it ASAP. So what do? We have to admit the patient first of all, and then we start with the IV antibiotics. So for 2 to 3 days, you have to keep the patient on IV antibiotics like penicillin G 2 million unit. Every 4 hourly, you have to give eye injection. Along with the penicillin, we give the metronidazole 500 mg 6 hourly. After 3 to 4 days, we can start when the patient can have oral tablets. We can start the patient with the oral of the penicillin, amoxicillin as well as the metronidazole. Surgically, we remove the area. So if in case there is a fistula that is seen with the acute suppurative, so if you can see there is pus and fistula in acute suppurative, we remove it via incision and drainage. We drain the fistula. If there is small sequestrum, we do the sequestrectomy. If the limited extension of the lesion, we do saucerization. And if there is large lesion involving the cortical plate, we remove the whole of the cortical plate. We call it decortication. That this osteomyelitis we have also covered in the radiology series of the multiple choice questions. So the answer is going to be definitely a dental infection causes the osteomyelitis of the jaw, and it more frequently involve the mandible. In maxilla, the disease represent with well localized area of the initial infection, while on the other hand, in the mandible, the bone involvement is more diffuse and widespread. Also, clinically, these patients with the acute osteomyelitis will have severe pain, and this osteomyelitis is one of the most common bone infection involving the dogs as well. So the teeth in the area of osteomyelitis, they become very loose. The patient will have difficulty in eating. In fact, it's not even possible for the patient to even open the mouth. It's so painful. And also, if you do the blood examination for this patient, you will find elevated WBCs in the blood. So this acute osteomyelitis is also involved with a leukocytosis. And in the X-ray, you will find a moth-eaten radiolucent appearance. So coming to the next question, which condition is the result of a pulpal infection that extends through the apical foramen to the periapical tissues? So what it's saying in the question is, infection from the pulp if there is some infection from the pulp, it goes through the apical foramen and it extends into the periapical tissues. What do we call this kind of infection? So we call it as a dental abscess, or we call it a periapical abscess, which we have covered just now, that it's a localized collection of the pus in the bone which is present at the apex of the root, and the tooth which involved becomes non-vital. So the first symptom is the patient will have tenderon percussion. Later on, the patient will have a severe throbbing pain, which is because of the pressure develops because of accumulation of pus. Since the pus start getting accumulated and there is no space for the pus to escape out the pressure, so there will be lot of pressure developing inside the pus, inside the close to the apex of the teeth. So the bone is going to be lot of holding lot of pressure, and because of that the patient will have a severe throbbing pain, and also patient may develop the swelling of the overlying mucosa. And since the pulp is necrosed, tooth is not going to respond to EPT or any cold test. It can respond to a thermal test though. So we have to do the emergency treatment for this particular patient. There is a lot of pain and swelling associated. We have to drain this pus. And how do we do it? We do it through the canal. The ideal treatment is we do the excess cavity and then we create a space for this pus to drain out. And this particular condition is known as acute apical abscess, which we have covered just now. Acute apical abscess, or we can say this periodontal abscess, or the symptomatic apical periodontitis. So confirmatory test for the vitality of the tooth is basically a test cavity. It's not a cold test, even though we have studied cold test is the best among all. But what's the confirmatory test to know the vitality? It is the test cavity. That's the last resort. So without a local anesthesia, we start preparing the teeth. And if the patient feel pains, that means there is something which is vital. Either it is a partial necrosis, or if the tooth is in fact giving a false negative result. The preferred temperature for the thermal test, so for heat test it is 65.5 degrees Celsius, and for cold test it is 5 degrees Celsius. So that also you have to remember, it can be asked. So that's a periapical abscess which we have talked about. Then what is a periodontal abscess, guys? So periodontal abscess is something which is basically developing through the periodontal pocket. So if there is a periodontal pocket and this pocket is causing a spread of infection or spread of abscess into the PDL space, so that is known as a periodontal abscess. In that case also there is going to be alveolar bone loss, but we will find the pocket formation. So if you see a pocket formation along with the bone loss, that can be suggestive of a periodontal abscess. So tooth will usually be tender on percussion and palpation, and it will also respond to the electrical pulp test. But if we see periapical abscess will not respond to the electric pulp testing. So that is how you can differentiate between abscess which is present in the periapical area or abscess which is associated with a pocket. So that is a periodontal abscess. Gingival abscess, on the other hand, will be present in the gingiva. So the answer to this question is going to be a periapical abscess, which is due to the pulpal infection. If the disease is due to the pocket formation, then we can call it a periodontal abscess. Since there it is not talking about pocket, it is talking about a pulpal infection, then the answer is going to be a periapical abscess. And gingival abscess is basically when there is break in the gingival surface. Can be abrasion due to mastication or oral hygiene or any dental treatment, but it is going to be through the break in the gingival surface. So coming to the next question, which of the following condition is characterized by pain that is spontaneous and has period of cessations like intermittent in nature? So it's saying that which of the following condition is having pain which is spontaneous, and it has some periods like this pain stops and then this pain reoccurs. So it is either reversible pulpitis or irreversible pulpitis. In order to understand both of these conditions, we should understand what are the different infections of the pulp. The normal pulp will be asymptomatic. It will give mild transient response to electrical pulp test as well as cold test. That means if you apply current to a tooth, and if a tooth is normal, is not having any pulpal infection, no caries, nothing, then if anything is live, you give current, the patient or that thing is going to respond to that. If the thing is living, it is going to respond to the current. Or if you apply all of a sudden very cold stimulus, then also there is going to be slight sensitivity, or we can say a mild response or a spontaneous little bit of pain, right? So that is a mild response. And once you remove the stimulus, there is going to be no pain. So that means there is going to be mild transient response to a normal pulp. What if because of caries, the caries are preceding close to the pulp? Then there can be a reversible pulpitis. The first thing we see is reversible pulpitis. As the name suggests, reversible means this condition is going to be such a way that if we treat the condition, the tissues come back to normal. They don't die. So if we treat the reversible pulpitis, the pulp is going to be a vital pulp. So in case of a reversible pulpitis, the patient will be symptomatic. That means if you apply a cold test, a cold stimulus to a particular teeth which is in a state of reversible pulpitis, there is going to be very sharp pain. But once you remove the cold stimulus, there will be no pain. So how do you check it? If the pain is exaggerated or if the pain is normal, you have to take a teeth in which you don't see any caries, which is basically a contralateral teeth. Once you give a cold test or electric pulp testing to a contralateral, or we call it a control teeth, which seems to be a quite normal, so that is a control teeth. So first of all, you apply either the cold stimulus or the electric current via a vitalometer or the electrical pulp testing, and you see that at how much current the tooth is responding, and you see that how much is the pain response of the patient to a cold or to a control teeth. Then you do the test on the suspected teeth. Once you do the test on suspected teeth, if you are doing a cold test, in the normal or control teeth, the patient was having a mild transient response. But in case of a tooth with reversible pulpitis, the patient will all of a sudden jump in pain once you apply the cold stimulus. And once you remove the cold stimulus, the patient will have a normal teeth. So the pain goes away. Once you remove the stimulus, the pain disappears. So that means the patient is having a hyper response to the pain. Such a condition is known as hyperalgesia. Hyper means there is increase in the response. Algesia means to the pain. So the patient is having a sharp hypersensitive transient response, that is increase in the response to the pain when the stimulus is given. Since this condition is reversible, that means the patient reverts back to normal. So once you remove the stimulus, the pain also disappears. This particular condition is a symptom, it's not a disease, and that is why we call it reversible pulpitis, inflammation of the pulp, though it is reversible. So how do we treat it? We have to remove the cause, and if we remove the cause, that's the treatment of this particular disease. So the cause can be due to caries or deep scaling or deep restoration without a proper base or liners. So the pain is due to A delta fibers, and that are due to the dentinal hypersensitivity. Now, what if we don't remove the cause? What if we don't excavate the caries? What if we don't use a proper liner and base? then this reversible pulpitis can progress into irreversible pulpitis. Irreversible pulpitis is if you give a cold stimulus to a teeth, and that patient is going to have a quick, sharp, hypersensitive response. But once you remove the cold stimulus, then also the patient will have pain. So that is how you differentiate between reversible and irreversible. Now the patient is having irreversible damage to the pulp. Now it is beyond repair. You have to do the filling to that particular patient. You have to remove the infected part and then you have to do the filling for this. So most of the times, whatever part of the pulp is infected, you remove it. You do the pulpotomy procedure. Partial pulpotomy procedure is also known as the CVAC pulpotomy. So you do remove the part of the pulp which is infected. And see, we have two kind of irreversible pulpitis. One is acute. Acute means the patient is going to be symptomatic. That means before coming to the clinic, the patient will be having a pain while bending down the head or lying down on the bed. So usually these people presents with a night pain at the night. So these people will have either the sharp shooting pain or gnawing, boring, throbbing type of pain. So these patients will complain that they have pain during the night times, especially, or lying down or bending over intensifies the pain. And this is because of the increase in the cephalic blood pressure, which is related to the confined pulpal tissue. So basically, this kind of pain, which is due to the bending down, is also seen in the maxillary sinusitis patient. But the maxillary sinusitis patient will have the pain difficult to localize, while on the other hand, the acute irreversible pulpitis can localize the pain. So this, which is because of the increase in the blood pressure to the head, that is because of the change in the intrapulpal pressure. Now this reminds me of telling you two important points. One is the pulpal capillary pressure. One is the pulpal hydrostatic pressure. So pulpal capillary pressure is 14 centimeters of water, and pulpal hydrostatic pressure is, so the capillary pressure is 14 centimeters of water and the hydrostatic pressure is 10 mmHg. If this pressure, which is normally 10 mm of Hg, if it is more than 35 millimeters of mercury, we call it irreversible pulpitis. Irreversible changes start appearing. So in case if a patient is having irreversible pulpitis, there is going to be pain on bending and lying down. This pain is going to be either sharp shooting, most of the time sharp shooting, piercing, or this pain can be gnawing, boring, or throbbing. And there is irreversible damage to the pulp. Now, electric pulp testing or cold test, it will give a painful stimulus, and there is no value or little value via the electrical pulp test. So what happens in case of having progression to this irreversible pulpitis? There will be partial necrosis of the pulp in the advanced stages. So if you see the partial necrosis of the pulp, you will find that the patient will have more pain while having a hot food or drink items. If you see, if the patient tells you that if the patient eats or drink anything cold, it subsides the pains. That is also an indication for a partial pulp necrosis. So in the advanced stages, remember that the patient will tell the pain intensifies on having a hot food item, while the pain relieves on having a cold food item. So that indicates a partial pulpal necrosis. That is a progression of acute irreversible pulpitis. And the reason why there is relief of pain while having a cold food is because this pressure which is built up, this Intrapulpal pressure. So as I've told you, in normal intrapulpal pressure is going to be 10 millimeter of mercury. But what if this pressure is increased from 10, say up to 15 millimeters of mercury, this pressure is increased. Then if the patient eats anything cold, there will be contraction of the dentinal fluid, and this contraction of the dentinal fluid will result in decrease in the pressure. So the pressure in the dentine will be less, and because of the pain is due to the pressure, and the pressure is little bit relieved. If say suppose if the pressure is 15, so there is only slight elevation in the pressure, and if the patient have some cold food item, or if the patient eat or drink anything cold, there will be relief in the pressure because of the contraction of the dentinal fluid, and this will cause a relief in the pain. So the patient will have some relief in the pain while having a cold food item. And in this case you have to fill the tooth with a base which have a sedative property like a zinc oxide eugenol. Or if the tooth has become necrosed, there is partial necrosis, so in that case you have to go for a root canal therapy, or you can do a vital pulp therapy if the tooth is still vital, like pulpotomy. So the nerve fibers which are associated with irreversible are the C nerve fibers, and the nerve fibers which are associated with a reversible pulpitis are the A delta fibers, which we'll be covering in some other questions. So remember that A delta fibers are the first fibers to the pain. First, they carry the first pain response. So these are due to a normal painful response, like a transient. But if you see the type C nerve fibers, which are non-myelinated, they are due to the pulpitis. So reversible pulpitis, which is hyperemia of the pulp. Pain doesn't occur spontaneously. It requires the irritant to initiate the painful response, like if the patient is having cold or sweet, and the patient will have a brief pain, a sharp and a brief pain. But once the patient stop eating that food which is giving a painful response, the pain also goes away. So if you see the radiograph of these particular patient, it appears very normal. Sometimes there may be deep caries involved, and the tooth is usually not present on percussion. So there is no percussion. Thermal test also, the pulp responds more to the cold stimulus than to the hot. So treatment of reversible pulpitis is the sedative filling or a new restoration. Basically we have to give a thick base, while on the other hand, the irreversible pulpitis. In irreversible pulpitis, since there is irreversible damage to the pulp beyond the repair, and if we talk about symptomatic irreversible pulpitis, the patient will have pain on bending or lying down. And if you remove the stimulus, then also the patient will still have pain. So that is going to be a response to the cold test, especially on the lying down or bending. Now talking about the progression of disease from acute irreversible pulpitis to the chronic irreversible pulpitis. Now, since the term chronic is there, you can analyze that the patient will be asymptomatic, and that's the reason that since the radiographic findings are quite normal and there is no symptom also, so this is a disease which is very difficult to diagnose. In fact, it can be asked as a question also, and it has been asked as a question that which of the disease is difficult to diagnose. So you have to ask for a patient if there is a previous history of pain. If you find radiographs are quite normal, there is no clinical symptom, but you have to be dependent on the case history. So this particular condition is very difficult to diagnose. In that case, you will do a pulpectomy or a root canal therapy, basically a pulpectomy with a calcium hydroxide dressing, and you have to renew this dressing until the defect is repaired. This chronic irreversible pulpitis can also cause internal resorption of the teeth. Now, if there is whole of the pulp which is dead, so progression of the disease from the irreversible pulpitis, if not treated, will cause a necrosis of the pulp. There is going to be necrosis, means death of the pulp, which is due to long-term interruption of the blood to the pulp. There is, because of the necrosis, because of the irreversible pulpitis, since there is inflammation of the pulp over the time period such that there is interruption of the blood is not reaching to the pulp anymore, and since the pulp is not getting enough blood supply, the pulp start dying. So there can be partial necrosis, partial death of the pulp, or there can be total death of the pulp, total necrosis of the pulp. Now, this can be symptomatic or asymptomatic. Most of the time it is asymptomatic. If there is partial necrosis or necrosis of the pulp in the anterior region, most of the time it will cause a discoloration of the anterior teeth. Electric pulp testing and cold test will give a negative response. Necrosis can be a dry necrosis and wet necrosis. Dry necrosis means the canal, everything in the canal has dried off. So it will result in a periradicular pathosis. Liquefactive necrosis means there is pus associated with a necrosis. So if necrosis is left untreated, it can go into the periapical region and cause periapical diseases. All the diseases we have talked about, first of all, it will cause apical periodontitis, acute apical periodontitis, then it will cause chronic apical periodontitis, then it will progress into abscess, acute apical abscess, then into chronic apical abscess. So all these diseases are the progression from the pulpitis. So first of all, we will have the dental caries. This dental caries, when reach towards the pulp. So first of all, say suppose that's a tooth. First of all, there is going to be dental caries. So this dental caries will start progressing. Once it reaches the pulp, the bacteria will go inside the pulp. Then there will be reversible pulpitis, then irreversible pulpitis, and once there is necrosis of the pulp, then it will progress into the periapical region. So first of all, we will have acute apical periodontitis, over the time period chronic apical periodontitis, then we will have acute apical abscess, then we will have chronic apical abscess, then the infection can spread into the bone and we can have osteomyelitis. So that's how the progression of disease occurs. So if we reread the question, which condition is characterized by the pain that is spontaneous and has period of cessations? Like there is intermittent pain. So the answer is going to be irreversible pulpitis. So in case irreversible pulpitis, the pain will vary from a mild to a readily tolerated discomfort to severe throbbing pain. It can be excruciating pain. So the pain is basically spontaneous. It is intermittent. And in irreversible pulpitis, if we remove the stimulus, then also the patient will have pain. So the pain lingers after the removal of the irritant, and the pain is not readily localized by the patient, but it is diffuse. So even the lying down can increase the pain, or bending the head can intensify the pain. So the answer to this question is going to be the irreversible pulpitis. So guys, these tables and the notes are provided in the link in the description box below, or you can check out our website www.xtooth.com for more interesting notes. That's about for today's lecture. I hope you have enjoyed it. If you have enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up. Also comment in the comment section below. I hope this helps you clearing your competitive exams. So till then, keep reading, keep learning, stay motivated. I will see you soon in the next lecture.